We're going to get started. Is the sound working? Microphones. Thank you so much to Mark up there who is live streaming this, and we'll put it on YouTube. I'm Nancy Goodban. I wanted to welcome you. I'm a member of UUFRC.
And hi, I'm Diana Reddy, and I am with the SFOP PIA group, Redwood City Residents for Renter Protections. And I just wanted to thank Nancy and the Social Action Committee here at the Unitarian Universalist Church for co-hosting this event with us. I really appreciate that combined effort and the live streaming that Mark is doing. And wanted to just comment that it takes a lot of courage to run for office. And I wanted to thank the candidates for being with us tonight and for being open to yet one more. I think it's practically the last one of the community forums, the candidates forums. And just to say that we don't always agree with each other, but we will need to be respectful of each other. And I just wanted to set that guideline for us and for candidates may say something you don't necessarily agree with, or we may say something that other people in the audience don't agree with, but we would really like to respect both the candidates and our fellow audience members. Thanks.
Thank you, Diane. And thank you also, Dana, for bringing the food. There is food out there. There's also a sign-in sheet. And I wanted to just say, if you didn't stop by the table for Represent Us, there's one of their cards. It's right out there in the foyer. You can check with them. They're trying to get corruption out of politics. And we invited them to have a table here because you need to think about that at the local level first. Other housekeeping, there's restrooms out that back door and at the end of the hall. And we are going to get us out of here right at 7:30. What we wanted to do tonight was we're going to give each candidate in alphabetical order 2 minutes for an opening statement. Then we have 6 questions that we sent them in advance. They have 1 minute for each question. Then we'll open it at about 7 or so to other questions from the audience if our timing is correct. So welcome again to all of the candidates who have done this multiple times. And perhaps we can start with Alicia, your 2-minute statement.
Absolutely.
You should be able to leave the mics right where they are on the table because they did a sound check on that.
Can you, okay, great. Good evening, my name is Alicia Aguirre, and I moved here to Redwood City in 1988 when I landed a coveted job as a professor at Kenyatta College. I was excited to move here, brought my children here. They went to school locally, not far from where we are right now. And being part of the school, as a mom, you know, you're part of T-ball and Little League and Pop Warner and all the others, especially soccer, because they're 2 boys. I started being part of their school as well and be on their school board. And that led me to join the Redwood City School Board as a trustee. I was there for 5 years because I really believed that I wanted to make a change for not only my children, but the children of Redwood City. I was lucky to serve there for 5 years and was fortunate to move on to the city council to try something different. And I have to tell you that the last 10 years on the city council have been very rewarding. If I focused 5 years on education, which is my passion, I am a professor, being able to be on the city council led me to open the horizons, to get involved in other areas of infrastructure, of services, of water, of things that are important to us who live here in our neighborhood, our sidewalks, as you can see all the things that are happening and changing. And I continue to strive for ways to make sure that our city is one of the best, that it's safe, that the neighborhoods are, working together. I love the fact that we have block parties, that you can do those. I was at some of the parks this weekend with the art that was happening, that we're able to, involve not only arts, but education, the parks, and all the other things that are important to our cities. And I think my time is up, so thank you.
Hello, my name's Bain, and I know some of you in the room, and for those of you who I don't know, I have served 13 years on the City Council. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. The last 12 years on the City Council, plus a partial term back in 1998. Prior to that, I served 3 years on the city's Housing and Human Concerns Committee, which is a committee that works with nonprofit organizations and distributes funding to those. I've been involved in the community for a long time, and I ran for city council then for the same reason I'm running now, which is for a couple reasons. One is to help shape the future of this community, and the other one, quite simply, is to help people. And I don't measure my success in the number of tall buildings we have, I measure it in the number of people I've helped. I've helped people in every neighborhood of the city, whether it's getting a stop sign or a street light or a sidewalk repaired. That's part of the job, and that's part of what I continue to do in the next 4 years. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Janet Borgens. I've been in Redwood City since 1969. I have served on 3 boards and commissions, all of which I was appointed by your city council. The Senior Affairs Commission, Housing and Human Concerns Committee, and currently I'm a planning commissioner in Redwood City. I've enjoyed every single one of those because that's where I learned about the needs of my community and how I can help shape the needs that you have in your community. I'd like to take that experience to the next level, and that's the policy level. The City Council is the organization that actually creates and approves policies that you all have to live with every day. So I would like to be part of that, and along with that, I'd like to take your message with me. I want to take your voice with me. Not everyone can make a meeting, so I would like to be your voice. I'd like to hear what the needs are in the community. When we make decisions, we need to make them with you in mind and all the neighborhoods. I live in Friendly Acres, which is on the other side of town. We've dealt with some very strong issues over there, flooding being one of them. The city has worked hard to correct some of those, but we really need to get that moving forward. I'm sure you have issues also in your neighborhood. I've heard them as I've traversed the community and found out what keeps you, bothered. What keeps you up at night? What are little things that we can help work with? And we need to understand what those are in this community. So I want to be that voice for you. I want to take my experience working with the community to that level, listening to you, and having the conversations together as we move forward to solve these issues.
Good evening. My name is Rosanne Foust, and I have served on the City Council since 2003. I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for being here this evening. Many of you have been at other forums, so I really appreciate that you're here to hear us again. I want to thank Nancy and Diana Reddy for putting this together. When I first moved here in 1995, I was pregnant with my first daughter. We had no friends or family. I didn't know anyone in the area, and one of the reasons I got involved was childcare, because we didn't have childcare. And since we didn't have any family, that was a concern. And over the years, I've done a variety of things in addition to serving on the City Council. I'm a member of the Redwood City Rotary. One of the first projects I did with the Rotary was Habitat for Humanity down on Rollison Road. I painted inside. I've been on the Library Foundation, where I helped raise $800,000 for a collection for books to open the Redwood Shores Library. I've consistently supported the Library Foundation. I've supported all the school measures, both in Belmont Redwood Shores as well as Redwood City, because I lived in Redwood Shores for the first 13 years of my time in this community, and then now I live behind Sequoia Hospital. I've really enjoyed this campaign because it has allowed us to talk to just a variety of people in a variety of situations. And it's been very challenging but very rewarding. So thank you again for being here this evening.
Good evening, everyone. I want to echo my thanks to Nancy and Diana and just say that as a sometimes member of the UUFRC, it's kind of nice to be up here. I'm usually out there where you guys are, so thanks to all of you for being here. My name is Shelly Masur, and I'm running for council. I think about it from my perspective as a mom and as a nonprofit leader, and thinking about the focus I want to bring on community engagement, a focus on developing the infrastructure we need to support all the development in downtown, and a focus on really making sure that Redwood City stays a great place for kids and families. I want to bring my 10 years of experience on the Redwood City School Board to the Redwood City Council. I think we're all feeling the effects of growth and development in Redwood City and how rapid it's been in many ways, and that's why I really believe that it's council's job over the next several years to work with community, both new and long-term residents, to figure out what kind of city we're going to be and how we're going to work together to address these issues. I talk about infrastructure and sometimes people's eyes glaze over, but really infrastructure, as many of you know, is what makes an impact on our lives every single day. We need to catch up to all the building. We need to address traffic and parking and housing and pedestrian and bike safety and think about the impact on the schools. We need to think about our human infrastructure and the people who make Redwood City work. We need to think about our police and fire and the other people who are really making it possible for us to be here. For me, Redwood City's been a great place to raise my family. They've been getting an excellent education, and they've had access to so many great opportunities, and we really need to work together to make sure it stays that way for coming generations. I think the city can work to expand its partnerships with the school districts, increase our number of parks, make sure our libraries continue to be vibrant havens for so many kids, and together we can make all that happen. So I would ask, if you haven't voted yet, that you would consider voting for me when you mark your ballot. Thanks.
So I'm Tania Solé. I was born in New York City to a Guatemalan father who met my American mother in New York while here in the US studying for his PhD. When I was 8 months old, we moved to Guatemala. We spent the next 16 years traveling around Central America and Europe. I attended first grade at the US Army Base School in Karlsruhe, Germany. 6 schools later, I attended Academia del Perpetuo Socorro, Our Lady of Perpetual Help in San Juan, Puerto Rico. 20 plus years ago, I came to the Bay Area when I was hired by a software company to head their US division. We sold that company to Intel. After that, as I joke, I burn in and burn out of high tech. I burned out, and I ran a small auto repair shop in Sunnyvale. During that time, I got involved and started to represent the auto industry in Sacramento, my first foray, if you wish, into government. I was a representative to the Bureau of Automotive Repair. I was the chair of a task force at Governor Schwarzenegger's Conference on Business and Entrepreneurship, and I was also selected to be the delegate to the Western Regional White House Conference on Healthcare. 5 years ago, I moved to Docktown, a floating community right here in Redwood City. I became president of the Residents Association and got involved with city government. I grew concerned when the city took over Docktown and started making motions that were confirmed recently when Mr. Aaron Acton made the continued existence of Docktown only an alternative. I have found since I started campaigning that almost every neighborhood feels that they aren't being listened to. I am running to make sure that council listens to everyone, not just a few. I look forward to getting your support and being able to represent your interests at City Council. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you, and thank you again for your commitment. We had put together a few questions. The first question I'm going to ask was actually submitted by the youth group here in UUFRC. And let's start the other direction. Tania, if you want to answer it first, and then we can move to Shelly. The question is, I have noticed a lot of change in Redwood City. Do you think it is good or bad?
Change itself is not good or bad. I actually find it exciting. It's how we plan for change. Do we put the right pieces in place to allow us to grow? For those who had a chance to read my post and patch today, I highlighted traffic. A lot of the things have changed since the downtown plan was put in place. The drought, sea level, or our understanding of sea level rise, social companies, traffic apps. So a lot of what we planned for the downtown does not consider a lot of what we have there today. So I strongly recommend restudying all of our options for the downtown.
Ready? So I think there are both good and bad things that have happened in our downtown. And I agree that you can't say necessarily it's one or the other. As I said in my opening statement, my kids have benefited from a lot of the great things that have happened since we moved here. And we really appreciate being able to walk downtown, take advantage of the restaurants and the movies and the shops. That's been great. But I also understand that the pace has been very rapid, and it's been difficult to sort of catch up to how quickly things have gone. So I've talked about a little bit in various places that we need to pause, and I think you'll hear that a bit tonight. Allow the infrastructure to catch up, understand the impacts on the community, and really work together to figure out our future. So thinking about community engagement, thinking about how we're going to understand what is next for Redwood City, both in the downtown and throughout our city.
So I think also the downtown precise plan was started by a community task force back in 1999. And we brought the community together and asked them what they were looking for. Because when I first moved here and I took my daughters, after they were a little bit older, to the Fox Theater for the Nutcracker, and we walked out and there was nothing and nowhere for us to go. We couldn't get an ice cream, we couldn't get a soda, we couldn't get something to drink. I had to go to San Carlos. So in thinking about the downtown precise plan and looking at the combination of housing, retail, and office space, we wanted to keep the downtown as a new neighborhood. And I look around where we're sitting today and I look at these neighborhoods and I heard loud and clear, do not densify our neighborhoods, but we need more housing. And we've had some questions about, well, what does the new neighborhood of downtown bring our current residents? And that's something that, as the questions go on, I'd really like to address, because I've thought long and hard of what does downtown bring to the new residents. So more to come.
So I don't think change is good or bad, but change is scary. So if we don't change as a community, and especially a downtown, you tend to die, and your young people want to go someplace where there's excitement and more people. People want to be where people are. So I think the degree to which we changed, this was a community-based discussion when it came to our downtown precise plan. We had lots of meetings regarding it. Everybody kind of weighed in on what they wanted, little sticky notes and sticky dots all over, paste boards. And it was an exciting time. But the degree to which this happened is huge. It was a 20-year plan, and it's happened in 5 years. So I think when we look at it, it's like we are a huge success, and at the same time, we're like, whoa, we need to slow it down a little bit and revisit. So I think the opportunity has now arrived for us to actually revisit this plan and say, is it accomplishing what we wanted? Is it going in the direction that we want? And is it what this community needs?
So from my perspective, it's both. First, the good. When we redid the courthouse plaza, when we created that plaza by demolishing a building, we created a community living room where people could come and gather, and we've done a lot of events there, have been extremely well received, particularly the concerts on Friday night. The theater brought people to what was once a sleepy downtown. And in 2007, when I was knocking door to door, I didn't find a single person who was unhappy with those changes. In the last 3 years, what's happened is the heat has gone from slowly cranked up to suddenly cranked up. And that's what people are feeling right now. It's the pace of change that is hard for people to adapt to get used to. As some others have alluded to, there are infrastructure challenges that have not caught up. And the other thing that I think we're feeling is a little bit of a sense of loss. There were things to do here before the downtown exploded. There was Malibu Grand Prix, there was Mel's Bowl. There were a lot of things for families to do that unfortunately have been victims of development. We have to address that as well and replace those uses here in Redwood City.
So I think that the only thing that is inevitable is change. And I remember when I moved to Redwood City that I was able to go to this little shopping place across the street from the post office, and that's where I'd get my shoes done. There were a few things there, and I know some of you have been here longer than I have, but I remember going downtown to like a men's store to get my son's Boy Scout uniforms and things like that changed. So when the theater came, I thought it was exciting to see that, because when you went over across Whipple to go to the movies, you have to wait forever to get out, and now it's a lot easier to get out. So that changed while I've been living here. And then change has happened now to our downtown in a very different way. But change that I think I see it as a very positive. I think I see growth as positive. I know that there are also opportunities for us to look at that and to think about it. And I know that that's one of the future questions that we're having. But I am excited with what's happening, and it's happened very quickly, and it's happened probably faster than none of us even thought of, just because of the way the economy came. But I'm excited about what's happening. I see the change, and I've seen it not only now, but since I've been here since 1988.
Thank you all for your thoughtful answers. The second question, and let's start with Alicia on this question, just coming the other direction. The second question, how do you feel about the proposed moratorium on large new development downtown in order to first see what the impact is of current development?
So and I'm glad it's kind of jumping off of where I was ending up. What I think I know I want to do is to look at what we've done. I know that everything we've done as a council, having sat on the council, being on the utilities committee, has been very thoughtful. We would not build anything without knowing the infrastructure is there, the water is there, and that the plans are there to move forward. So I think that a moratorium would hurt us more than anything else, because we also are building affordable housing downtown and Bradford Street and other places in infill. So if we put a moratorium, we're going to really shoot ourselves in the foot by not having the opportunity to build in other areas. I think it's a great time for us to see how this new neighborhood, because it is a new neighborhood, happens. You know, what is going to happen with the traffic, what's going to happen with the other things, how is that going to affect our schools? And look at those things before we decide that it's a moratorium. We still have the opportunity to build in other areas, and as long as they don't affect, as Rosanne mentioned, our neighborhoods that we've been walking around, then I think it's important.
So I think we need to give the Planning Commission some tools to work with here. I've heard everybody on this panel say that we need to slow the pace of change in our community, but I haven't heard very many specific ideas in terms of how we can do that. I propose that we do a comprehensive traffic study now, before all of the developments are settled, so we can see, do the traffic patterns match our projections from a few years ago, or are they different? And then once the housing is occupied, once the box building is occupied, then we can see what truly are the traffic impacts of development. The Planning Commission approves what we've given them guidelines to approve. So we can't fault them for approving all the projects that they have. What we need to do is we need to talk about the guidelines and talk about whether they still make sense. I'm in favor of opening up the precise plan and having exactly that conversation with all of you involved in the conversation.
So I would support a pause at this time, and the reason being is what Councilmember Bain just said. I think it's time to revisit what our intentions were. I think we need to look at the direction that the community is going right now. I hear a lot of filter out into the surrounding neighborhoods from the impact of not having parking downtown, or it's there but they can't find it, so it's easier to park in the neighborhoods and then walk downtown. So I think we need to revisit our plan. We have an outdated traffic study. I think we need to study that. I don't think we need to stop complete development, but I definitely think we need to revisit it. It happened so fast. If it was 20 years in the making like we had planned, we would be able to see as we move forward. But right now it's happened so fast and it's been so successful that we need to look at those successes and find out if in fact, is this what the intent was? Is this what the community wants? It's community driven, and I think we need to bring it back to the community for discussion.
So I've asked the question of different people who have said, what do you think about a moratorium? And for me, a moratorium means to stop all development. And that means all affordable housing projects, that means the Bradford site, that means additional housing in the downtown that we still have room for, because our downtown precise plan calls for 500,000 square feet of office, 2,500 housing units, and 100,000 square feet of retail. We have met the cap in office. And through other forums, no one on this panel has said that they want to see that increased. We're at about 65% of the way there for housing. And I want to see more affordable housing. Next Monday night, before the council, there will be a proposal to allocate 10% of 2,500 units, that's 250 units, for affordable housing. So for the remaining development, I want to see that affordable housing bill.
I've talked to in my introduction and in my previous question about having a pause, and I think you've heard from different people up here that that's sort of the general consensus at the moment. But I agree that a moratorium implies to me a complete stoppage, and that language is a little bit difficult for me to grasp. I do think there's some other things that you've heard that are super important for our city. We need to look at traffic. We need to do a new traffic study. I do live really close to downtown. I look out of my window at the Box Building. And so people do park in front of my house when they want to go downtown on the weekends, which is okay, but it just means that we need to think about how are we impacting what's happening around the downtown, not just specifically within that square, the blocks that we've designated as downtown. And I also feel we have a couple of questions about housing, and I know it's an issue that's important to a lot of people here. We really do need to increase the amount of affordable housing we have in our city, including the downtown.
So I'm strongly in support of a moratorium. I believe we have some severe limitations, such as water, potentially maybe even electricity, certainly roads. I also believe that the argument about affordable housing being a reason to continue growth is disingenuous at best. For affordable housing purposes, the first thing we need to do is preserve what we have. To say we're going to destroy hundreds of units and yet put a plan in place to produce a couple is a net negative for the community. Saying that growth should continue for affordable housing reasons is downright unethical. Thank you.
Thank you all. For the third question, let's go back the other way, and we'll start with Tania. As a council member, what do you plan to do to prevent displacement of current residents impacted by new development and increased housing costs? I'm sorry, what do you plan to do to prevent displacement of current residents impacted by development and increased housing costs?
So I mentioned a little bit earlier that my background was in auto repair. Automotive stations are the type of stations that a lot of towns do not want. And the way they are preserved is through zoning. And so I believe that the same way that automotive repair and automotive smog stations are preserved through zoning initiatives, we can do the same thing for affordable housing. We can maintain and preserve our existing stock, putting proper zoning policies in place.
The housing issue is not only a Redwood City issue, as you all know, but it's a regional issue. And so when I was walking to apartments last weekend actually, I was walking with Assemblymember Mullen, and we heard from a lot of residents that they're concerned about the fact that they could potentially be kicked out of their apartments at any time. So we talked about a couple of different things with the residents. One of them is thinking about the incentives that the city can provide to apartment owners to keep their rents stable over a period of time. So there's a current program in place around fire safety, but I think there's other ways to expand how we're providing incentives to landlords to keep their rents stable and keep their buildings in repair, the kind of buildings that we would all want to live in, which is what I think people deserve. I think the second thing is to look at city land and to build on city land. There's one project proposed for city land right now in the Bradford Street, but we need to also look at other opportunities to build affordable housing on city land.
So as I was preparing for tonight, I went to the city website and I pulled off, and I'm going to hold this up because I would encourage all of you to take a look at the press release the city released a week and a half ago concerning our meeting that's coming up next Monday night. It lays out a series of initiatives that the council is going to discuss about increasing the housing stock. And I'm going to pair it with something that was in yesterday's Mercury News in the Insight section. And it talks about Prop I and the pause in building in the Mission. And Enrico Moretti, who's a professor at UC Berkeley, talks about his opposition to Proposition I, which would be a moratorium on all building of housing in San Francisco. And he cites some very good information in there, which does make me think that we need to find a way to preserve the housing that we have and to increase the housing supply, especially at the affordable level.
So I'm really excited to hear that the city is having the discussion regarding a percentage of affordable housing in all developments. I think it's an opportunity that we as a community missed when we first did our downtown Versailles plan, because we had redevelopment dollars, and then those were taken away from us by the state, so that was our money to build affordable housing. But we put our eggs all in one basket, and we can't afford to do that again. We need to make sure that we lead this, we drive this car. We are the ones that say what we want and how we're going to get it. So I look at, and Shelly alluded to it, the Fire First program. I had early on mentioned that I'd like to dovetail on that and say apartment owners or units, property owners, we will help you upgrade your units to a safety factor by giving you a low interest loan. You would have to buy into it. It's not a city-owned project, but you would add to it, we would add to it, help you upgrade your property with the promise of affordability for about 5 years. So that would add another 5 years to a 10-year program that they have on the Fire First. It's an opportunity for us to preserve what we have.
So building affordable housing is really different from renter protections. And what a moratorium on large developments, I think we'd have to decide what large means, but we can have a moratorium on large developments, particularly office buildings, without stopping affordable housing units being built. But what the question was about was, what are we going to do about protecting renters? So the first thing I think we need to do is we need to update our ordinance on renter relocation so that when a company comes in and buys a building, they can't just flip that and evict all the residents. Our ordinance was last updated in 1992. We need to revisit that. But I've also called for a study session on renter protection in general so we can talk about all the options, the pros and cons, and figure something out, because we're not in this alone. San Mateo just appointed a blue ribbon task force that consists of realtors and apartment building owners and legal services for the poor and the needy who are tackling this very same problem. I'm watching that very closely to see what we can take away from that and do here in Redwood City.
This is probably for me, the number one issue. And I see it because I see my students at Kenyatta College. In fact, I was talking to a couple of them today about where they're going to live and what they're going to do, and they're the workers that we have. And we're looking at it, and as mentioned before, this is not just a Redwood City issue, it's a huge issue in the region. We're looking at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, where we're looking at transportation and housing. It has to be a series of things. We have a series of revenue sources in order for us to do it. Yes, we have a plot that's going to be on city-owned on Bradford Street. That's not ingenuous, it's true. We are really going to be building there. We're looking at taxes from Airbnb type of areas. You've heard talk about the fire safety first. We have to look at every single piece. Today we had the opportunity also to talk to some of the landowners and talk to them and say, you know what, we need to keep our workers here, because for every person that comes here to work, we know that we have 5 people that need to serve them in order for them to have a middle-class job. So we need those folks to stay here. And it's not one answer. It has to be very, very creative and looking to partner not only with the city, with landowners, and with any revenue source that we can to build these homes and to keep them here.
Thank you all. The next question, and let's start with you on this one, Alicia. What do you think should be done with the Cargill salt ponds?
So the Cargill salt ponds are not something that I think I can give an answer on, because I don't own those lands. I think if anything came forward to the city, we need to look at all of any plan that would come, and if it meets all the CEQA requirements. We also have to look at what state lands is saying about those areas. This is not, I am in favor of keeping open space as much as possible in our city and adding pocket parks. The last 3 days, as we mentioned, there were parks that we're rebuilding and adding things to them. This is a benefit to our community. But I don't think I can say anything about Cargill, because there is nothing for me to say. There's no plan in front of me to make a decision on. And if there were, we have to look at all of the pieces: CEQA, state land, sea level rise, all of the things that affect a plan as big as that's on the water. And I frankly don't think we will ever be able to fill in the land as we did in Foster City and Redwood Shores and in San Mateo. I think this is a different time.
All right, I'd like to see a very small part used to give us access to the bay so that we can help mitigate the flooding in the Friendly Acres neighborhood. With the rest of it, I would like to see Cargill donate that to an open space trust so it can be restored to wetlands.
So I really like the idea of preserving some of it for the flood protection because it definitely needs it. And if you that remember the last couple years, the mobile parks under there were underwater. We were out there with buckets taking people out of their homes because of the flooding. I would love to see the property behind them, which is Cargill property, used for flood mitigation. We would have to negotiate that. There's a phrase called eminent domain that scares everybody to death. However, nobody would lose their home out there. It would be an opportunity for everyone on the peninsula to benefit from. But I also like to see a potential open space park or something that could be used by the community. Could have a soccer field out there, you know, but I really do believe we need to pay attention to sea level rise. I think it's very important. It's something that is right up in front of it. Today, there was an article in the paper regarding all of the scientific information that's come out regarding the restoration of all of the open space along the bay to protect us from flooding and sea level rise.
So there is the possibility that next June, the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, of which I sit on as the South County rep, will put a ballot initiative for a parcel tax on the June ballot. And the idea would be to generate funds to be able to restore about 35,000 of existing wetlands that are held in publicly owned lands that are publicly owned. In April of 2012, at a council meeting, I suggested that the citizens of Redwood City should have the right to vote on the Cargill project. 2 weeks later, their 50-50 plan was pulled, and it hasn't come back. I've been quoted in the paper as saying, I hope it never comes back.
So the report that was issued today talked about this, the bay rising 2 feet in the next 15 years, which is a lot faster than I think many of us have heard until now. It also advises us to use naturally occurring marshes to serve as a buffer for sea level rise, and specifically calls out the Cargill property as one of the places that should be restored to wetlands to protect us from sea level rise. It estimates that we need 54,000 acres of wetlands to, again, serve as that buffer between the sea level rise and existing homes. And as Rosanne indicated, there is a call for a region-wide parcel tax that all 9 Bay Area counties would have to vote on to help restore some of the wetlands. I support all of that. I think that's what should happen, and I will work to make it happen.
I was heavily involved helping a lot of the mobile home parks that were flooded. They are right beside the Cargill salt ponds. So I would strongly favor a solution that would allow the ponds to help defray flooding type problems.
Thank you so much to all of you. This next question was submitted by the youth group here at UUFRC. How much of the city's budget is allocated to youth activities, including after-school programs and other activities, and would you support additional youth funding? Tania.
So what I would suggest about funding, I've seen a lot of different programs, both through parks, through private, public type relationships, like with the Boys and Girls Club, and I would strongly support expanding those types of programs.
So according to the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Department, they spend just over $6.2 million a year on services for youth and teens. The library has a total budget of $7 million, some of which is allocated to children, youth, and teen services. So there is not an insubstantial amount of the city's budget that's going towards youth and teen services. That being said, as a school board member and as a parent, I'm always open to working with young people to determine whether there are other things we could be doing or there are other ways we could be spending our budget. Should we be allocating more money to children, youth services? I think the Teen Advisory Board and the Youth Advisory Board of this city are great model and great young leaders for us to work with as we think about that. And then the last piece of it is, again, coming from a school's perspective, I think the city can always continue to improve and expand its partnerships with the schools to make sure that we're serving kids the best that we can.
I really appreciated this question, and Shelly gave the numbers because I believe we both checked with our park and rec department on the numbers. And there's really good information, again, folks, on the city's website, because we publish an annual report which kind of tells you what we are doing in each of our strategic initiatives. For me, we can't do enough for the youth in our community because, frankly, they're our future. They are going to be the ones that will be our teachers and our police and our firefighters and our business people and hopefully our city manager and our park and rec director. And so I love the partnerships that we have with the school district. I love everything we do with the various foundations, from the Library Foundation to the new Parks and Art Foundation, the 3 different parks. Many of us were at this weekend for the Harambe building of the kind of mud structures, benches. And I just think we need to continue working with all the different groups that are out there, and if we have the funds, we should put them there.
So I think that we have about 23%, 24% of our budget that is allocated to park and rec and libraries. Our libraries have become learning centers. They're not the library that they were in my day. They're actually learning centers now. And we need to continue with that and keep them as modern and as beneficial to our youth as we can. Because as you just heard, they are our future. What I would also like to see is the youth come to us. I would like the youth leadership through the churches, the schools, the park and rec, the neighborhoods, to come before the council and actually give reports on what the youth needs in this community more than what they may be getting, or how what they are getting can be even enlarged or even made better for them. So I would like to see the youth come to us, be able to give us reports, so that we can move forward with that. I think it's imperative that we partner with our schools and our leaders in those facilities to make sure that the youth are getting what they need so that they can thrive in this community.
All right, so you heard the numbers, and is it enough? I mean, it's never enough, I guess, depending on who you ask. But we also have a lot of other services that need money put towards them as well. I want Redwood City to be a community for all ages, and that means not just investing in city programs for our youth and for our seniors, but also bringing in activities that will be things for them to do. I mentioned Malibu and Mel's Bowl. We need to work with those types of private businesses to attract them to the community and help shape this into the kind of community where there really is something to do for people of all ages.
Well, I'm really grateful that the youth were part of this whole forum, even though they're not here. I don't blame them to be part of this program. But, you know, a couple of years ago, youth was one of our 5 core initiatives. And we've evolved and changed that, and now we call it Community for All Ages. When you think of our total budget is about $169 million in Redwood City. So if we're spending $14 million, we're doing a little bit less than a tenth of our budget just on youth service. And I'm not talking about the total budget for parks and recreation or the total budget for the library, as the numbers have shown, but just programs like teen activities, after-school programs, the Sandpiper, the Red Morton Center, the literacy programs at the libraries, all of those programs. And I think that the fact that this city has made that one of its goals and will continue to do so, because I believe that that's, and as I mentioned, to me, that's very, very important, because it's partnering, when you have partnering with the city and the schools to have programs and education, that there's no better way. The parents feel safe. Their kids are somewhere where they know that's safe.
Thank you to all of you. And we did have a meeting with the youth and one of them did want to moderate, and I'm so sorry that she was unable to, because it would have been great, but she had too much homework. It's a Monday night. We knew that could happen.
Happens.
So thank you for acknowledging that the youth were involved, and I wish they were here, because they will be voting in another couple of years. So the last question that we did in advance was also submitted by the youth, and it is this. And let's start with you, Alicia. We'd need more safety for pedestrians and bikes at road crossings. How would you address that?
You know, I remember a couple years ago, we were excited because we have 17 new miles of bike lanes in Redwood City, and now that has expanded. The underpass between one marina to downtown that is going to be built is not only pedestrian, but it's also bike. We have the safe routes to schools that we've been working on. That's not just a city program, it's a county program. You know, and then we have the International Walk to School Day that we're working on. And then on Brewster, I don't know if you noticed, but all of the safe things that have been added because you have Sequoia High School there. And in fact, we got an email from someone in our city saying, oh my gosh, this is the first city that actually put green stripes to show that this is a new pedestrian or a new bike lane. So those are the types of things that I think we need to continue to add. I teach at Kenyatta, so I go up and down, and now with all this, the Farm Hill changes, I've seen so many bikes go up and down from the college back to the students. They probably take the bus up and take the bike down, but I don't know if they can make it all the way up. But I've seen much more mobility on the sidewalks with parents with strollers and so on. So I think we need to continue to add things that are safe and where people feel safe walking and biking.
Yeah, pedestrian safety is extremely important, and we've done a lot over the last 4 years to improve pedestrian safety throughout the city. My favorite example is what the city did on Massachusetts, right near Henry Ford School, where we added not only the signs that you've seen telling drivers about their speed, I think that does make them more aware, but we also added lighted crosswalks and we added an island in the middle of the street. I think we need to look at making those kinds of changes throughout the city. I was walking over in the area just south of Woodside Road recently, and over on Orchard and Oxford. Those streets are very dangerous to cross Woodside Road. I think they need to be lighted at night so that when somebody comes, it's very clear to the drivers that there are pedestrians there. I think there are intersections like that throughout the city that need that kind of attention.
So I think it's, with our growth has come a lot of traffic. And I think we're seeing the angst of that with our pedestrian safety. I see it in my neighborhood. I definitely see it on Woodside Road. I think we need to partner with our regional agencies to make sure that if we're not in control of that street, that we find a way of helping put up those lighted crosswalks. The more we can do to bring attention to this is a pedestrian crossing, the safer it is going to be for our community to cross. I see it all the time where people are trying to cross and the cars just keep going. So if we had a button you could push, it happened on Jefferson many years ago. It happened because a child was killed crossing in a crosswalk. And so therefore they put that walk sign up. Let's not wait. Let's take control of it and make sure that all of these difficult crossings, Woodside Road by Middlefield, we still need to do something with that overpass. I know it's on the schedule. Woodside Road by Orchard, trying to get out of that neighborhood, we need to also consider that. So any of our neighborhoods, we need to make sure that we bring you on board and find out what your needs are.
So I agree with what Alicia, Ian, and Janet have already said, and I'd like to bring two other things to the conversation. One, Redwood City instituted this past year, in the last 9 months, a Complete Streets Advisory Committee. And one of the thoughts behind having a committee was we're able to access grant funding through both the San Mateo County Transportation Authority as well as the state and other entities that would give us funds to do more of the green striping that's near Sequoia High School, to do more of the lighted crosswalks. Also what is in Menlo Park, where you have something as simple as the flags that a child can pick up from one side of the street and have the flag as they go to the other side of the street near where Kepler's is. So I think there's a lot of ideas out there, and with the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, we are able to access the funds for that. So I'm excited to see how they're gonna work with the neighborhoods and what they're gonna bring forth.
This question actually comes up at school board meetings periodically because people come and testify in front of the school board because they assume that the school district is solely responsible for crossing guards, which was part of this question. It was about bike safety and about crossing guards. And so we actually just had a conversation about it a week or so ago. When somebody came and talked about the intersection of Goodwin and Alameda. I don't know if you guys have noticed in the morning, kids are trying to cross over there and the cars are not stopping. It's very unsafe. So I think there's a couple of things that I would add to what you've heard already. One of them is continuing to work with the district. The city and the school district can work together to share costs of crossing guards and increase the number of crossing guards we have across the city. Even with better marked crosswalks, even with lights, even with all of those things, we still need people in some places to help make it possible for kids to cross the road safely. Bike and pedestrian safety has been one of my platforms from the time I started this campaign. So I have also talked about increasing connectivity and separated bike lanes, etc.
This is one of those questions that when you go last, there's nothing really terribly new to say. So I would support everything that's been mentioned. I would say that this is not just a youth issue. This is also an adult issue. I ride my bicycle. I walk. So it's not just the youth, and yes, they need to be trained, and yes, we need to put proper procedures in place for them to learn proper road protocols, but it's also something important for adults, and especially if we want more people walking and biking both downtown and throughout the city.
Thank you so much to all of you. Now we're going to switch gears and we're going to ask for questions from the audience. And I will go around on one side, and I'm hoping that Carol Cross can join me on the other side, and Diana will moderate. We're just going to request, just as a guideline, that you don't give a speech, but just ask a brief question, because we're trying to get a sense of what our candidates feel. So we'll alternate one side of the room and then the other.
While they're moving with the microphones, I might add that when the table was being set up, there was a little discussion about what order should be followed, and there was a conversation about it being in alphabetical order. Well, should it be by last name or first name? And it turns out it's exactly the same. Isn't that?
That's true.
Yes.
Interesting fact.
Just speak right into the mic. Yeah.
Okay, my question is about the term pause. We've heard it at a number of these candidate forums, and I don't think that any of us really understand what's going through your mind about pause. I'll give one example. One of the concerns I have about the precise plan is that back in 1999, the people involved at that time approved what I think is far too liberal height limit. I worked for 20 years in the financial district in San Francisco. We really treasure our weather here. If we have 12-story buildings downtown, the number that are there in the pipeline, we're not going to have that weather anymore. We're going to have shade and we're going to have wind tunnels. We have, one thing is to let the current buildings that are being built.
We do need to ask you to be brief, because we won't have very much time for questions.
Current buildings being built can finish, but there must be a dozen in the pipeline. Does a pause slow those down, or are we going to finish out downtown before we make any study?
So I hope that question was clear enough to candidates. Let's start with Janet and then just move to the right so that we'll change the sequence a little bit.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. To me, pause means exactly what I've been advocating for, and that is to stop what we're doing and revisit what we've accomplished already and see how that plays out. Before we had this plan in place, we did have the ability to put very tall buildings in very haphazard areas all throughout our downtown. Our zoning allowed it. So this gives us the opportunity. When I say pause, it means let's just stop for now. Let's look at what we've done. I don't think we need to stop forever, because maybe that's not what the community wants. But I do think at this point, because it happened so fast, that we need to revisit what the intent was of those who participated at that time, and then go back and bring all of the new voices back in, and those that have paid attention as to, whoa, how'd this happen? Let's bring everyone back to the table.
Yeah, to me, it means not approving any more large developments until we have a comprehensive traffic study and we know the impacts of what's happened so far. So that's about as clear as I can be with that. It doesn't preclude doing smaller projects like the project on Jefferson for Habitat for Humanity, which the city's putting money into, which does provide more affordable units. units. So where I think we need to have a conversation is, how do we define large? Is it by the number of square feet? I don't know, but that's a question, that's a conversation I would like for us to have as soon as this election's over.
You know, many of the, and that's a great question, many of the developments that are in queue are not going to be able to make it because of the cap. So what I'm thinking, what pause means to me is to evaluate, to review, to get data, and to see what this impacts are on our city before we are able to approve other projects. The ones that we're committed to or that made it, excuse me, made it into the line, I think we need to study those and see where they are. One of the things I was quoted in the paper, if I had any regrets on what we've done in our building, and to me it was heights. Because, you know, when you visualize something and then you see it actually happening in your city, you realize the difference. And so that was something that surprised me. Not that I regret it, because I think it was a plan that we were all very comfortable with, a lot of community input, but that's one of the ones that actually caught my attention.
So in my case, a moratorium is really based primarily on water. So I think that we need to sit out 1 to 2 more seasons to find out where we are with water. Having said that, I would say that the buildings like Indigo that are 90% there need to be allowed to be completed. But anything new, anything that hasn't broken ground, that doesn't start.
Yeah, it's a great question, so thanks. And I think you've heard a variety of answers, and I would just say for me, I've said in a couple of different forums, we need to finish building what's already on its way, not stop in the middle, and then stop and assess the impacts, understand what's happening, do some additional research, do traffic study, understand the building height issue and how that's impacting how we're experiencing downtown, how it's impacting the rest of our community, and then work together to make some decisions about what happens next.
And when I've used the word pause in a number of forums, I said I want to see what's existing right now, how we integrate that into the fabric of the community. And I want to give you a specific example about a project. There is a project that is on the city's website right now that is going through the process that is slated for the Powerhouse Gym site. Originally, that project was double the size of what it's proposed. And it was because of the community engagement, because of the pushback, because of the rapid pace of change, that project was slated to host SurveyMonkey. That company has since gone in the spec building, the 200,000 square feet that's up at Bay Meadows. So the project that is being proposed for the Powerhouse Gym site is much smaller. It's half the size. It has 2 levels of underground parking that would be available to the community, and it has retail wrapped around on the bottom floor. That project has not been approved yet. So, but I wanted to give you an example of something kind of in the queue. I mean, there are no more cranes downtown. And personally, I love not seeing any cranes.
Thank you all. We'll go to this side of the room.
And it looks like we'll have time for maybe 2 questions.
Okay. I don't know if you have answers to this or not, and it's different, but it's about the issue of the pedestrian crosswalks earlier, not where there are any traffic signals or anything, and that's the issue. Like particularly on Woodside Road, where I drive all the time, there are a number of crosswalks where there's a left turn lane and 2 straight lanes, and you cannot possibly see whether there is any pedestrian anywhere. And those are the things I think we need, something with lights or other things. And there seem to have been a number of experiments near the downtown post office and nothing left. I don't know if anything has worked or what can we do about this. I think these are the really dangerous ones.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Those are good.
Shelly, why don't we start with you?
Alrighty. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, it's a great question. We addressed a little bit of it in the answer to the youth question around what can we be doing to increase bike and pedestrian safety. So I think part of what we can do is to hear from people, just like we just heard from you, about where are some places where you're finding it particularly dangerous. I don't walk in every area of the city, so I don't always know where it is. In my area, I know where some of the dangerous parts are, and I have some ideas about what I'd like to see change in terms of how we have the sidewalks, how far away from the corner cars can park, and where we might need additional stop signs, where we might need additional crosswalks. So I think those are all different pieces of what you can do to promote pedestrian safety and to promote bike safety, as long as we can hear from all of you, where do we need to be looking at it and how can we work together to make it safer for you to walk?
May I interject? This frightens me as a
We should
child.
probably go to the next question, I think.
Yeah, we do. Roseanne? Oh, no, why don't we go to the right? Yeah, Roseanne?
Okay, so answer this.
Yes, yes, yes.
I just wanted to make sure, because I heard go to another question.
No.
So I'm going to agree with Shelly. One of the things that I would like to see is we have some very active neighborhood associations in our community, and then we have some inactive ones. So what we need to do is re-engage the neighborhood associations to find out where the places are. I cross Jefferson at the post office where you're talking about, and the lights are supposed to come on, but in a sunny day, I've stepped out multiple times, and in some ways, I'm surprised I'm still sitting here, because it is dangerous. And so you have to, as a driver and as a pedestrian, but we need to know, and we need to be able to access the funds, which our Complete Streets Advisor, I'm going to come back to that, because that is very exciting for our community, that we can fix some of these issues. And the sight lines and the bushes that get in the way of folks, I've gotten a number of calls on that. So thank you for bringing it up.
So two come out to me real quick. Hudson and Woodside Road, when a pedestrian's trying to cross, the drivers are looking left and they're turning right because they want to beat that traffic and there's pedestrians there. The other one is Veterans and Maple, right by Kaiser Hospital. The pedestrians on the corner of Maple and Veterans, they go to step off, there's a big utility box there, the drivers are looking left, they're turning right on red. I would propose no right turns on red, because I really think that people are looking left to beat that traffic. Those are two very, very dangerous intersections, and I walk them all the time, and they are very dangerous. So I would really like to propose that we look at this, I like the idea of bringing the neighborhood associations, give us your worst pedestrian crossing, and let's see what we can do with it. But I really think no turn on red will help a lot on some of those corners.
Yeah, I like the idea of both getting the neighborhood associations involved as well as going through our Complete Streets Committee and having them do a priority of which intersections really need to be addressed, as well as looking at new technologies out there that will be more visible than the current street lighting.
As I've been precinct walking, I've actually realized there's a lot of streets that are difficult to cross as a pedestrian. And that's pretty scary. And I have folks telling me, especially on the street when we're on Brewster, walking some of the precincts. And so there's a lot of ways that we need to work, but I like the idea that's been mentioned about bringing folks in and saying, this is my, post online, your worst walking nightmare, and, having a study. But different cities have done different things. We like speed bumps. Menlo Park likes roundabouts. San Carlos likes dips. What are the things that help our city to make sure that it's safe? Jefferson Avenue is just notorious down towards Woodside for children that are crossing to go over to the school, to go to MIT and all the other schools. And so I see the children and the families walking. So and those are just some of the ones that I've seen or that I've driven, or some of the ones that I walked. So I think we need to continue to study and make it a safe city. How do we balance that with the needs of cars to get to and from work, for families to take them to school, to get to work on 280, to get to work on 101? Those are the things we need to balance.
When I first moved out here from New York, I was shocked that there was such a thing as right on red. It doesn't exist back east, for the obvious reasons, that it's a safety issue. Did I love it as a driver? Absolutely. But as a pedestrian, not so much. And I would say that now, as the congestion is really increasing, the problem has even become a problem, like you say, for the driver, because my concern now is that I not be in my rush to make that right and then end up hitting someone. So it's a number of different things that we have to consider given the size and density of the city. It's a problem that goes with the growth that we're having. And so what we may need to do is make some changes if we're going to become a more urban environment.
Numerous studies are clearly demonstrating that money in our political system now buys access, influence, and even legislation at the national and state level. And many citizens are concerned about the influence at the municipal level. Campaigns in the last half dozen years or so, there's been a dramatic increase in spending and contributions. We're wondering what kind of reform measures or proposals would you support to assure the citizens that they can be confident that their city government is not corrupted by the influence of campaign contributions?
Roseanne, do you want to start?
Sure, and we've been asked this question at multiple forums or a variation thereof, and I've said that right now, as of today, I think I have 110 different donors at varying levels, from $50 to somewhere in the $3,500 range. The Lochtefelds are a big supporter of mine that own the Fox Theater. The realtors have given actually many of us money. Tania had the best answer at another forum, which I hope she'll say again. Campaign finance reform on the local level, I mean, we could talk about caps. The Board of Supervisor has caps on limits. We could talk about public financing of campaigns, which is what is done in other countries, and there's a very limited amount of time to run a campaign in other countries. I mean, there's a number of different measures. One of the things I've been really clear with folks is our campaign donations are public record, so everyone sees who donates to us, but because they donate, they're donating because they believe in what I stand for, not because what they think they're going to get. And I really want to be clear on that, because it has come up a number of times.
So we get this question every place we go, and I'm going to go on record as I did with the newspaper reporter when he asked me this question, what I thought about campaigners or city council makers taking money from developers or people who they would be making decisions for later. There isn't anyone sitting before you who's I wouldn't work with, excuse me, or take their integrity to the bank. There is nobody sitting here who would use those donations in a way that would only benefit them. And I have seen large donations in campaigns to those sitting up here, and I have seen the decisions made by these people that are clear, concise, and based on issues. So I do believe it costs a lot of money to run a campaign. Just a mailing can cost you $6,000, so it's very expensive, so you have to count on donations. But being bought, that's not happening. That's not happening up here. It's not happening in Redwood City. So although respect the question because I understand the concerns, I will go on record saying that I can't be bought. My decisions can't be bought. I'm an independent thinker, and I feel that everyone that I am campaigning with feels the same way, and I respect that.
So one of the things I appreciate about being in the local level is that everybody has access. Everybody here in this room has the same access to me as any developer, as any real estate person. I'm probably the person in the room on the table who's raised the least amount of money. And part of that's because there are a lot of people I just didn't ask. Now, directly to answer your question in terms of what can be done on the local level to reform it, I'm not sure that we have a big problem. You can look online and you can see who's donated to each of our campaigns. It's on the city clerk's website. But if people do feel like there's an issue, one of the things we can do is we can limit the amount that an individual or an organization could donate to our campaign. I've actually been doing this so long that I do remember we used to have a limit. And I think that was back in the mid to late 90s, that individuals could only donate up to $250. We could look at the organizations and say they can only donate up to $1,000. That's something we could consider.
You know, I really don't think that, as Ian mentioned, that we have an issue at the local level. I think an average in our city is $30,000 that you have to raise. A little bit more, a little bit less to get our message out, to get the flyers that you see in the back room out, to see all the long signs, you know, to have the calls and the things that are probably getting annoying, but that's what we need to do to say, you know, in fact, someone left me a message at home, I see you're working really hard, you know, so that because they keep seeing this stuff. But for me, I'm honored by some of the donations. For example, and I mentioned this at the last forum, my dad from Michigan sent me $50. He's 84. And for him to have sent that to me means a lot to me. And yet there are other folks that in our community that we've mentioned, folks that own businesses that have also invested in us. And invested in the sense that they believe in us so that we can get our word out, so we can get the flyers out. So my donations are multiple. You'll see them multiple in the sense that there are a lot of little ones, some medium-sized ones and all levels, and we all report them. You know, there's nothing hidden. The 460s are going to come out, the new filing, and so it's there for everyone to see.
So if I didn't have to raise a penny, I wouldn't do it. And I'm sure everyone here is the same. It's the single hardest thing that someone has to do to sit up here, to ask friends, family, and supporters for money. I can't tell you how shocked some people have been when I have asked them for money. The assumption is that there's some kind of an electoral fund that has money that's going to fund campaigns. And so one of the thoughts that I had is maybe we should cap it. Unfortunately, I talked to a couple of people about that option, and they told me, well, I'm not going to, set a fund that's capped per candidate, so that there would be like an election committee that distributed, say, $5,000 to each particular candidate. So the argument that I got was from people who didn't support a particular candidacy to say, why in the world would I want to support that candidate? So as crazy as the system is, some people feel it works better for them. The bottom line is a dollar is a dollar. The bottom line is anyone can donate to me. The bottom line is it's all public. Would I like this system to change? Absolutely.
The question was originally about campaign finance reform, I think. And as a general rule, I would love to see publicly financed elections from the federal level down to the local level. I think it would be great. I'm not hopeful that it's going to happen. But, you know, I run a nonprofit, as I said at the beginning, and so I raise money for my nonprofit, and in addition to having to go out and raise money for a campaign, it's not my best way to spend my day, constantly asking people for money, but as everybody up here has indicated, it's necessary because not everybody comes to forums like you all do. Some of the only way people hear from you is either if you have a flyer that you knocked on their door and you've handed to them, or somebody else has handed to them, or if you send them mail, and you've heard from my fellow candidates that the cost of that. So if we could find a way to do a little bit of reform at the local level, I wouldn't be opposed to a discussion about a cap on contributions. And I wouldn't be opposed to thinking about other ways to think about how we make it possible for candidates to run.
So we might be able to squeeze one last question. The answers need to be sort of brief, so we can promise to get you out by 7:30. And we can start with Ian.
Ian, we talked about this earlier, but I'm concerned. I've seen that Dick Specker, his name is, just bought the Hess Apartments, and the rents will double there. And because of how expensive apartments are now, 140 multi-unit buildings were purchased this year in Redwood City. What that means is all people of moderate incomes are going to get the boot. And I want to know if there's some kind of solution. Waiting for money to come down to buy low-income housing is not a solution. It's too meager, and there's too many people involved. If 47% of the population are renters, and half of those are making too little to pay $3,000 a month, which is what a one-bedroom is going for, we need a solution that is bigger than that. I just heard on TV that... Okay, I'm sorry.
I want them to be brief, so
Well, I'll address that by saying I'm concerned about that too, which is why I talked about updating the ordinance on renter relocations. to prevent exactly the kind of thing that has happened in the past in 9-10 Clinton, and that I think...
Can they relocate into the city?
Well, and that's another issue that we need to address, and I think the way that we need to address that is by giving people a living wage so that they can afford to live in this city. So I don't know what the minimum wage should be set at, but it needs to be a lot higher than it is right now.
Did you want us to continue to answer the question? So, you know, we hear about those bad landowners, and we don't hear about the ones that are actually, because I've met with groups of folks that have concerns, and a lot of us on the council have met with some of the landowners who say, I want to keep them here. I'm doing my best either to give them a good relocation fund or to keep the rents down. So we hear about the really bad ones. Now, there is an issue, and we talked about this earlier because there was a housing question, that it is region-wide. So we need to continue to do what we can to make sure that folks can stay here.
So the situation at 910 Clinton, I actually got involved and knew quite a bit of the numbers and did some research and got some research from other people. That building was flipped several times. I actually set up a timeline showing how many times people who had lived there like 20 years had faced a new owner coming in and not had to fear for their home. Had basically their rent increased $100, $200, but the owner still made out. He flipped his property 3 to 4 years later and doubled his money. What's really sad about what's happening now is they're not content to double their money on the home. They also want to double their money on the rent. So we have to put policies in place that in some which way allow for our community to actually stay here. What they are exactly, how exactly they're set. One of the tools, as I explained earlier, that I believe we need to study is zoning. And then in some which way or format, use zoning as a mechanism that allows us to keep some of our communities here.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about some of the ideas around making housing accessible and affordable for people, both current housing and future housing. And so I'm really happy that the minimum wage was raised. It's something that many of us have said in the past that we need to address in Redwood City. Redwood City can set a minimum wage. It's an important step, but even if we raised it to $15 an hour or $20 an hour, it's not going to make it possible for people to afford the market rate housing that we have right now. So some of the pieces that I talked about earlier around making current housing accessible and then also making sure that we have new housing that the city helps build, I think are a couple of ways we can start to address it.
So 2 things. Tom, I'm sitting on the San Mateo County Jobs Housing Task Force, which Ian had mentioned earlier in the context of the city of San Mateo. But there is a task force that was convened by Carol Groom, Don Horsley at the Board of Supervisors to really address this issue. They brought in the Apartment Association. They brought in the nonprofit housing developers. They brought in the Peninsula Interfaith Action. They brought in elected officials from all the communities, business groups. So really putting everyone around the table for 6 months to end renters, actually, and getting everyone around the table to help address exactly what you're talking about. One of the things I've been trying to get legs underneath is a housing trust fund, for Redwood City to have its own housing trust fund. And we have talked about that, where we can act with a nonprofit as kind of the go-between for we provide the funds between what somebody can pay and what the rent is. So I'd love to explore that further.
So I'm really excited to hear about that plan, because I think when you talk about bringing everyone to the table on this issue, you need to include renters. You need to include those who are absolutely directly affected by what's going on. We cannot legislate or control greed. We can, however, put policies in place that will limit the amount, and we call it rent stabilization. Rent control doesn't work. It just is not working in San Francisco. It's not working anyplace, because those who are living in those units are making far more now than they did when they first got in those units. So it's not following. But when you have rent stabilization put in place, I believe that the property owner can win, and so can the the tenant. So I think we need to bring everyone, including the tenants, including the residents, to the table so they can see and hear what's going on. But we do have some greed, we do have some really good landlords out here, and I have, as knocking on doors, I have heard that too, so I'm very excited about that. But you're absolutely right, we need to get on this now, and we can't wait for housing to be built. We need to do something now.
Thank you so much. And we can all tell that from these thoughtful answers, these candidates have really been working hard, thinking about the questions that were given to them previously and about these issues. These are complicated issues, and they do require people with true commitment. And as I said earlier, it does take a lot of courage to run for office. And many of us work in the community, and we love serving the community, but not so much running for office. So I applaud them, and we all need to applaud them for their commitment. And I did want to add that we do have a lot of food left over, and there are little Chinese takeout boxes out there. So please take some food home with you.
That's good. That's nice, very nice.
Thank you again to all for coming, and do take some food, and thank you to the candidates.